Growing up in Matagorda County, Texas, we had to hear a lot about the legendary French explorer LaSalle. I'm not gonna say his full name. You already know what's gonna happen. LaSalle must have had the most efficient crew with master craftsmen, like they all did, because before his accidental landing on Garcetas Creek, he had already built, supposedly, 4 forts across America. Fort Conty at the mouth of the Niagara River, Fort Miami in what is now Indiana, Fort Crèvecoeur, and the first Fort St. Louis located on Starved Rock, which is quite the curious geological formation, and I'm not quite sure what to think of that. The man built all 5 of these forts between an 8 or 9 year period in the late 17th century. Swear, bro, that's what it says. Just believe me, trust me. From New York down to Matagorda Bay, all right? 8 or 9 years. Each of these has its own official narrative, and every one of those stories is just as questionable as the next. You've heard the typical rundown: simple wooden palisades, humble earthen buildings, oh, and of course a church to scrub those dirty little sins. But if you're part of the Luminary Lighthouse family, you already know that's probably complete BS. It's a cover story, possibly, to hide the fact that these 2 were star forts of enormous size and geometrical perfection, not made of simple wooden palisades. I have some proofs from our curious ancestors within a few articles of the 19th century I found, showing that Matagorda Bay Fort wasn't that simple, guys. Wasn't that simple. First, let's read what we are told about Fort St. Louis off Matagorda Bay now, which they say it consisted of a 2-story structure with 4 rooms built from hewn logs and timbers salvaged from the wrecked supply ship. The roof was made of the ship's planking covered with buffalo hides. Despite these efforts, the settlement suffered from poor planning and lack of supplies, leading to starvation and disease among the colonists. So, just how you'd imagine, they describe it boring as hell, so I'd fail my history exams and never question what I was told ever again. Which totally worked for a little bit, but payback's a bitch. As you know, LaSalle would eventually be murdered by his feisty teammates. Some of his crews supposedly made their way all the way back to Canada and eventually back to France. Where's that story? I need to hear that one. Years later, the Spanish, after hearing rumors of the French colony, eventually found it in ruins. Then 30 years later, after they found it, they came back and built their own fort directly on or near the site of the French fort. Let's see what they built. Yeah, that's a star fort, and they didn't build anything. That was probably just there. Yeah. It said the Spanish used local timber and logs for the outer stockade. They packed the walls with a mix of mud, clay, and straw. And once they got access to Spanish tiles, they replaced the old buffalo hide roofing. We didn't have the Spanish tile? What do you mean we have to use buffalo? The house supposedly could hold 100 families, and there was a watchtower and naturally a small chapel for those silly little sins. Now let's check out the articles I found of the discoveries in this area. Believe it or not, they say a completely different story. Yeah, I know. It's unbelievable, isn't it? Why could they lie? How could they lie to us? How could they lie to us? This first article is titled, "Found Ancient Texas Fort," which ancient is a pretty strong word for a 200-year-old fort at the time, but whatever. The last 2 sentences say, "It was 90 feet square with walls 2.5 feet thick of red adobe bricks. The ruins were almost completely buried." And just to explain this a bit, 90 feet square is meaning each wall was 90 feet long. That would fit 2 full-size basketball courts within it. Then you tag on 2.5 thick walls of brick and you realize there was nothing modest about this at all, guys. Nothing modest. All right, let's see the second article of the 19th century. It's titled LaSalle's Colony in Texas. It goes, "At one point, just in the edge of a little glade, which was doubtless at one time a cultivated field, there are the ruins of a very large stone building connected by a wall of rough, undressed stone with the main part. This must have been a building of considerable dimensions and was either a church or the commander's residence. Many of the huge rocks that are now lying on the ground about the great door are covered with names, dates, and French words. few of which can be deciphered. Nobody knew French at that time. They couldn't decipher it. LaSalle's name, Belfort, and the date 1686 can be seen in several places. It goes on to say, there was a bastion at one angle for 2 cannons, and these could have commanded the field on 2 sides of the fort for a long distance. There was also a notch in the wall, which was evidently a port or loophole for a large gun. Okay, now listen to what they call this fort, okay? These guys in this article, when they discovered it. Turning north from the ruins of the church or castle, it is only a few steps to a dense forest through which for a considerable distance may be traced ditches and embankments. They then state that this settlement could accommodate 200 to 300 people, and then the writer states that the Spanish governor was astounded at the evidence of the former prosperity of the colony. Prosperity of the colony. We didn't hear that. You see, history isn't a straight line. It's a puzzle, and the more pieces we find that don't match the box they gave us, the more we realize we've been working with the wrong picture here. Hope you all enjoyed this one, and please let me know your thoughts on the subject. Love y'all, and have a good day.